forward. Let's see if we can move it back. There you go. Not quite a great setup. I've just 3D printed this top-down stand for recording videos where I'm using my hands so that my students can see me working with the same things that they're going to work with when I record video. But I haven't quite figured out the whole where to place everything thing, so it's a work in progress. If you were here for any of my previous videos, you know that I had a fleur de lucette. That's this guy. And let's see. We made a handle for a basket. This is the basket, and you can see this handle is huge. So this yarn was a 6 bulky. It's acrylic, and I ran it through the fleur de lucette 2 times to get it this thick. I 3D printed this base with feet. It has little holes all the way around it, and I use it to hold usually scrap yarn. But I moved my scrap yarn to a jar. So now I have a jar. There's actually scrap fabric in there too. And right now there's a knitting needle where I can't find its partner. So when I find it, I'll pull it back out of there. Yay me! All right. What are we working on today? This is Tunisian crochet versus knitting. And I have a project here that actually has all 3 in it. All 3. Which is sort of wonderful. From a tactile perspective, it has all the things you can think of that would be fun. So it has the stretch of knitting. It has the organic sort of rounded shapes of crochet. And it has the blanket thickness of Tunisian crochet, which is also called Afghan crochet. And I have a 3D printed purse hook. I'm hanging my yarn bag next to me so that the string for this, because it's not a finished project. It's still connected to the skein in the bag, but it allows me to keep it nearby, and it sort of moves a little bit, so if I pull, I can still work. Okay, so here's what we have going on. Let's talk about each of these things really quickly. I have a bag to my right that I take to my crochet classes, and inside are some sample projects that I've made for my students. The first one is a regular old crochet pumpkin. This particular design has no increases or decreases and utilizes back loop stitches to create a faux ribbing. It's pulled tight to create the closure. You can see this is kind of a stripe instead of a circle. I didn't pull it tight enough. It is wool, and the issue I had is that when I pulled too tight, it just disintegrated. And the yarn is about 15 years old. This is the same yarn, but in Tunisian crochet. And you can see that I have not done any ribbing or anything like that. This is the base stitch. It's called a simple stitch in Tunisian crochet, but it has a very distinctive appearance. One side is very lumpy, slubby, fluffy. The other is very smooth and with this little grid. It's actually being crocheted this way, not this way. So it's very easy to see these stitch rows. And as we talk about the differences between Tunisian crochet, crochet, and knitting, you'll find seeing the stitches is a big deal. Now this is not the best yarn for stitch visibility, so let me grab one of the others I have here. I have a hook caught in one of my samples here. Okay, so let's look at stuff. Now, remember, we're talking about Tunisian crochet, crochet, and knitting. And I'm going to give you my unpopular opinion, which is that no matter how you make it, you are making something. And there is no judgment from me if you decide to use a loom, a hook, your fingers, your arms, needles, a fleur-de-lis, whatever. You can knit with chopsticks if you'd like. I don't care. I find the repetitive action is the benefit. Okay, so what you're looking at right here, this is a 3D printed loom. And it got caught on something in my bag, so it's kind of mangled here. What I've done is I have a scrap ball of this green yarn. This is the same as that I made that basket with. And when you knit on this, this is a knitting loom. It's not crocheting. I chose to go crisscross like this, and you can see how there's little gaps. It's producing a 1-to-1 ribbing. And we'll talk about what that means later because it's not super important right now. But in knitting, that would be 1 knit, 1 purl. And you would do the opposite when you flip it over. In crochet, it's back loop only, every single row. And so that creates a very stretchy fabric. That's why it's used heavily around the brim of hats, right? Or the cuff of a sleeve, stuff like that. The neckline of a sweater. All these things are why this is done. So this little guy, I 3D printed this, but you can purchase longer versions. I 3D printed it to show some of my younger students that if they struggle with tension, that this is a very valid way to make fabric of your own. Now I can, after I pull these stitches off, I can switch from this ribbing technique to a flat technique, which would be just like the transition from a brim on a hat to the smooth body of the hat. So you can do those same things on a loom. So again, scrap yarn. This is what I used with the Fleur de Lucette. That's this guy. To make extremely thick cording that I use to weave the handle of a basket. And you can use that super thick cording to make an entire purse, to make accessories, to roll, to use as decoration. You can use it as sort of elaborate things. It does consume a lot of yarn, but it also makes a very durable, thick cord of that yarn. So it's sort of a trade-off, right? Okay, so let's talk knitting for a second. I have 2 items on my desk right now that were made in part using knitting. Let me just push all this other junk out of the way. The first is this lovely, I think it's called a scarflet or a neck warmer. And it is cabled. It's a very short project, so it's very easy to make. But it's good practice for cabling, which I prefer more elaborate stitches over color work. So that's my preference. I would rather not change colors or have the yarn change colors on its own, but do things like these lovely cables. Right? I like having the tactile feedback more than the visual feedback. So that's my preference. You know, everybody's different, but this is what I love. So I prefer more like a more tactile experience for the maker and the wearer. But I'm crocheting and knitting and Tunisian crocheting and loom crocheting for my own mental benefit, more so than for the object I make. So I try to not put a great deal of pressure on myself to make a perfect thing, but to enjoy the process. So there you go, because I want it to be enjoyable for me, and I want it to be enjoyable for the recipient or me. But I don't want it to be like high stress, it must be perfection. So I lean toward more forgiving styles. Here we go with, this was knitting, right? My cranberry scarflet or whatever it is. Inside this guy is also some knitting. So let's flip it around. This is a scarf I'm working on. I mentioned it in a previous stream. It has a hood I'm working on. And each panel that goes down the front, it hangs a bit more like a stole than a scarf. And I will crochet pockets to go on here. So this is what we have right now. This portion is Tunisian crochet. The gray border is crochet. And when we get to the part that goes behind my neck, because this is a scarf for me, this is in fact the first full-length scarf I've made for myself. This scarflet is also mine. So 2 things I made for myself in the same year. So exciting. This portion from right here, where can you see the tan transition to the burgundy right there? This is Tunisian crochet and this is knitted. And I'll show you that I really leaned into the strengths of each fabric type and to create something I would want to wear. So the panel that hangs down in front is not super stretchy, because it's got to support a pocket, and that pocket is going to hold my Kindle or a book. And I don't want it to overly stretch out the scarf. Second thing is I'm in menopause and I'm hot all the freaking time. I cannot wear a sweater. Like I'm gonna melt. I'm here in, Southeast Texas, baking year round. There's zero chance I'm wearing a sweater. So this is the knitted portion, and this is, if I recall correctly, it's called Andalusian knit. I have to go look at my notes for the pattern because I've created this myself. But I think that's the word. Andalusian is a unusual knitting style. And then this end, so this is the other front panel of the scarf, is also Tunisian crochet. And you'll see it transitions at about the same color. Again, I don't really change colors myself. I didn't make these stripes. This is self-striping yarn. So Tunisian crochet is not super stretchy. This little bit, the gray, everywhere on this, the gray is crochet. And so I have a double row, so it's 2 rows of crab stitch, which is like crocheting backward around the object until I get to this, and then it's half double crochet, which is a nice stretchy, I don't want anything super tight around my head, and I want it to drape nicely when it's hanging behind me. So this section is all crochet with some increases so it shapes to wrap around my head. You can see I think I dropped some stitches over here. And what'll happen is I'll use yarn at the end and literally weave in a new stitch in the gaps. It's not a big deal. So here we are. I have about 6 rows left. It'll be about this long when I'm done. And it is super stretchy. 2 directions of stretch with this. Again, half double crochet. So this object is crocheted, knitted, and Tunisian crocheted. So I'm going to put it away, and then let's talk about why I think a beginner might like Tunisian crochet. So these are all crochet. And this is the one I have in progress. This is a little swatch I have in progress. These are bookmarks, by the way. It's a free pattern I found on Ravelry. All of these. And I encourage my students to make small objects like bookmarks or ornaments or pumpkins in order to kind of get a feel for how it works. Like, it's just not that complicated. This has a macrame ring in it. It's just a little wood ring. I started with a standing stitch and just crocheted around the wood ring and then crocheted out, adding beads kind of at a consistent rate around it. This was free-handed. There is no pattern that I have. I've used wooden rings. I've used the frangible ring from a pop bottle. I've used 3D printed rings. And anything that gave me a little bit of support right here was adequate to get this done. Okay, so let's talk these things. Here's a Tunisian crochet hook. This one is, I think it's an I. Nope, it's an H. And I hate that it goes between letters and numbers and all that, because I never remember what any of that crap is. I think this is about, what, a 5 or a 6? It's millimeters. If everyone would just label them in millimeters, I'd be happy. So when I crocheted these, this is traditional crochet. And all 3 of these were made horizontally, working toward the opposite side like this. From here to here. Whereas this one is being crocheted, Tunisian crochet, from here to here. So I'll have another much thicker bookmark for my students. And I'm going to show you how a row works up in this. And then I'm going to pull out my crocheting and I'm going to show you how a row works up in that. Because I think you'll find, for anybody who struggles to see a stitch, Tunisian crochet makes that easier. So I'm going to move these out of the way. Get these pumpkins over here so we have a little visible area. You can see my stitch marker is on the last loop that I left behind. You grab the ball so it's easier to pull from. And again, this is like 15-year-old wool yarn, so it's a little bit, I don't know, old. It's like easy to rip apart. I literally just rip it. So here we go. As I get started, I'm not going to show you how to cast on for this because the cast on techniques are interchangeable between crochet, knitting, and Tunisian crochet. You can actually use any of the techniques to start. They're all the same. So that means like a provisional cast on in knitting can be used with crochet. Same ideas. Here we go. When I look at this, you can see this row of bars and the column. It's very distinctive. So Tunisian simple stitch is going to go underneath that first bar, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now before I do it again, I want you to look at a few things going on. I have a triangle of tension happening. One point of tension is wrapped around my finger with a little bit of a twist. I did that by sticking my finger here and wrapping around it twice. So if you have yarn that's splitting, you can wrap it more than twice to help it twist back into a tighter ply. For my purposes, the triangle is right now this point. So it's tension finger to work fingers. Right there, you can see I'm gripping it between my middle finger and my thumb. And then this hand is actually pulling these loops up. Can you see how when I do that, I pull that loop into a droplet shape? That's what gives me room to pull my hook through when I go to do that. So here's our tension triangle. 1, 2, 3. So you have to keep the tension triangle to make it easy for yourself. If this gets super tight, you won't be able to get your hook through. So you want to be able to see this shape in order to be able to work. Now, when you start making things like amigurumi, you're going to need to pull that as tight as possible, and it makes it harder to pull your hook through. So you have to use a smaller hook. So here we go. Under the bar, yarn over, pull up a loop. And you can see my work and my hand are very close together. Everything is happening in a very small, economical space. Because I want the movement to be as minimal as possible, right? If I'm holding this hook way out here and sliding it back and forth, it's a lot more work. I'm going to go beneath this, yarn over, pull up. When I get to this end, you can see there's a row here. Column, row, whatever. Now I have to rotate it in order to see both sides of the stitch to kind of close this up. If I go through just the front bar like I did with everything else, it's going to gap on the side. So I'm going to go through both right there, but I'm going to do the same thing. So let's look at it and count for a moment. These are very easy to see. I have a pen or pencil over here. Here we go. So you can see this is the first stitch. That was the loop first on my hook. Second, you can see the column beneath it. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. It's getting a little crooked right there, yeah? 9, 10. So if I wanted to verify I got all my stitches, this is how I do it. I'm looking at these vertical bars and verifying that there's a loop up above that matches it. So now let's do the backward pass. In Tunisian crochet, you put all the loops on the hook and then you remove them all, making all your stitches. Similar to in knitting, stitches are on this gauge in order to see them. Whereas in crochet, you only have one stitch or so on your hook at any given time. So this is where Tunisian crochet helps the beginner see their stitches. I actually think knitting is quite easy as well because the stitches are visible, but it's a little bit more of a fine motor balancing act. Like your fine motor skills need to get there. So I would start my child and younger people or anyone struggling with tension with Tunisian crochet. Here we go. We're going to pick up a loop. You can see I've got my hook pushed behind it, rotating it toward me in order to create a little S around the loop. This allows me to grab it with the hook as I pull it through. So in Tunisian crochet, you start with 1, and then you're going to go through 2. And repeat to the end. Now, I have the same tension triangle going, but it looks like my hand is shifted. So I have a finger here and my thumb gripping the work just below the stitch I'm working on. I have less tension with my tension finger. And then I have moved my hand away from the work to facilitate more movement, but I am pulling this way to make that stitch open up. So here we go. Pulling through 2. And I'm walking these fingers along the work so that they don't get left behind. That helps me keep tension on the 2 loops I'm currently working through. Because I really don't need tension on the ones I already finished, right? Can you see that my old wool yarn has stranded right there? So it's split apart. So I am literally going to manually pull it through that. So I've taken where it split apart and just lifted it up over the hook so it'll stop doing that. I could feel it when I was pulling. I knew it had stranded because it had a lot less give. So here we go. We made another row, and you can see it's kind of open work until the next row is made to fill it in. All right, what else do we have going on? Tunisian Crochet creates thick fabric. You can see the V's of stitches behind these vertical bars. So when I show you a knitted stitch, let's look at these down here. These are horizontal. These are vertical. This was knitted like this direction. So these stitches run from one end to the other facing that way. This is knitted in this direction, crocheted in this direction. And you can see the stitches are perpendicular to these. And when I show you a crocheted item, let's see if I can find something easy to see. I have flowers in here. That's not going to help you. Oh, here's a teeny tiny fingerless glove I knitted as well. This is harder to see. I think these guys would help. This was crocheted horizontally. And you can see the V's of the stitches are perpendicular to knitting. In this case, they do not have the vertical bar that crosses them. So that's an artifact of Tunisian crochet. Now, I can switch between the two right here and start crocheting normally. Even with a Tunisian crochet hook, it works just fine. So I'm going to pull up a simple single crochet. I'm going to pull it up before the bar instead of after the bar. So I just grabbed a loop and now I am pulling it through. So the first loop anchors it to the previous row. The second loop makes the stitch. So connect to the previous row, make the stitch. And I just did a yarn over accidentally. I do a lot of half double crochet, so that's why I did that. Here we go. Let's do a quick row of just crochet. I think this overhead thing is going to work just fine. Like, it's doing a nice job with the phone, but I got to figure out a camera position for my face that makes sense, because this is kind of dumb. I'm going to knock this out really quick. quite distinct from Tunisian crochet. So this row is crochet. This is Tunisian crochet. I think for most new crocheters or knitters, being able to see the stitches is one of the biggest challenges. I would say there are 3 things you can do that make stitches easier to see. And that is going to be true in Tunisian crochet, crochet, or knitting. 3 things. Number 1, have good lighting. Number 2, use thicker gauge yarn and hook, or needles or whatever. And number 3 is to choose colors of yarn that show contrast well. So when we look at this, it's much harder to see these stitches. They're almost invisible because they blend into the red. Whereas this pale, I think it's called platinum color. Can you see these little crowns? This pattern is called diadem. So it's a bunch of little crowns. This is a Suzette stitch, which is a very pretty stitch, but you can't really see it. And this is just a simple wave pattern. Now, all 3 of these yarns, the green, the red, and the platinum color, are the same brand, same gauge, same size hook. So when you think about, can I see my stitches, how I do my work, this is part of what you have to think about is, you know, it's much easier to see these stitches than these, or even these. Now, remember, this is a solid color, so I can use a dark colored yarn that's multicolor, multitonal, because the stitches in this cranberry color are easier to see than the Suzette stitches. Because this is a very uniform color and this is not. Now, this is self-striping yarn. And the stitches are, I would say, somewhat easy to see in the darker colors. But they're not as solid color as the red was. Again, this is multicolor. And in some regions, it's easy to see the stitches. In some, it's harder. So as you get started, those 3 things: good lighting, good color choice, bigger hook and yarn. Like, make it easy on yourself when you get started. If you feel like you must start with socks or something, like, you know, you're inviting a lot of difficulty. If that's the challenge you want, go for it. So I would encourage you, if you're learning, start with Tunisian crochet. Move from Tunisian crochet to either knitting or crochet. That is by far the easiest that I've seen. So if you love having those loops on your hook, if that's important to you, then you're going to move from Tunisian crochet to knitting. If these super organic shapes that allow you to make very fun round flowers and stuff like that, you'll go toward crochet. Here's a little crocheted flower so you can see little cute things. I have a couple more of those in my bag. I made that for my daughter when she was born. She's 13 and a half now, so it's a little old. Okay, let's see. Is there anything we want to add? If you have any questions, let me know. It's Tunisian crochet is what I think is the easiest. I think once you have that down, depending upon your physical dexterity, you'll find that knitting is okay if you are very dexterous. If you have less dexterity, or you just really want to make amigurumi, stuffies, that kind of thing, then crochet would be the direction. And I like crocheted fabrics, knitted fabrics, Tunisian crochet fabrics. I like it all when you think about wearables. So there's a place for all of it. And again, most important takeaway is that however you make, you are making. You're making something. Okay, what else did I want to give you? I can't think of anything else. I'll record this because I was in other folks' stream earlier today and they were asking how they should get started. I will look up their name and tag them in the recording if I can. I think that'll be helpful. It's nice to have a little bit of an idea of what things are that you can make with each type. Like each technique does something a little bit different. That's why I used all three on my book scarf. It's because, you know, some have great thick fabric and some have super stretchy, shapely fabric. It's okay for it to be different. And I will try to fix this for next time because this is ridiculous, my setup. Okay, we'll see you later.